There's Chris. And I think there's Robin. So, yeah.
Councilmember Baggett, it seems like there's some background noise on your end.
Really? Oh, I'll put my ear things on.
Thank you.
There we go. All right. Good evening, everyone. This is our City Council study session for August 10th, 2020. And per the Governor's Emergency Proclamation 20-28, the City of Auburn is prohibited from holding in-person meetings at this time. So as we do with our City Council meetings, we're holding our City Council study sessions virtually and telephonically. And Teresa, will you please call the roll?
Deputy Mayor DeCoursey.
Here.
Councilmember Baggett.
Here.
Councilmember Brown.
Here.
Councilmember Jiraj.
Here.
Councilmember Malinga.
Here.
Councilmember Stearns.
Here.
Councilmember Trout Manuel. Councilmember Trout Manuel.
Unmute yourself.
Councilmember Trout Manuel, can you hear me? Because you were muted.
She can't unmute herself. Here we go.
I'm here.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, let's move into our agenda items for this evening for council discussion. And the first item on the agenda is ordinance number 6784 with City Attorney Como.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor and Council. I am presenting ordinance number 6784 for your consideration this evening. This is a complete repeal of the aggressive begging chapter of the Auburn City Code. So currently that is chapter 9.08 of the Auburn City Code. And the reason I bring this forward at this time is, as you are aware and have been encouraging, we've taken a comprehensive look at our code recently, and this really assists with our city's interaction with some of our vulnerable population. So specifically, aggressive begging in the past, especially pre-2016, might seek to regulate the conduct of an individual that's panhandling, just for the purpose of doing so, of panhandling. Since that time, our officers and our prosecutors have not been citing to aggressive begging. Instead, we look at what is the egregious conduct, if any, and we would deal with that through the appropriate mechanisms such as disorderly conduct. So for example, if the individual was asking for money and they walked into traffic impeding the progression of vehicles or pedestrians, we would deal with that actually through disorderly conduct as it is now. So this is just a code cleanup mechanism. It's not really a chapter that's been used, and that's why we are recommending a complete repeal of this chapter instead of a repeal and replace that we normally would bring forward. And with that, I'm open to any questions if anybody has any for me.
Questions, Council? Councilmember Trout Manuel.
Hi. Yeah, I'm really happy that you brought this back, because I know that this is something that I've had some concerns about, especially when it comes to our intersection right on Highway 18 and Auburn Way South. I see that it's and it's happened to me where I have come to the stoplight and there's people very close to my vehicle. And a couple of times, some of them have jumped off the little, divider that's there and has almost come towards my car when the light has turned green. And so I wanted to know, how are we going to handle that with this coming to us? Is that going to be under 6 A, B, and C?
So the way we would handle that situation, regardless of this ordinance, is through disorderly conduct, because since 2016, we're not looking at whether the person's looking for money or asking for money. We're looking at the conduct. So when they're endangering life or safety, that is a disorderly conduct situation that we would be looking at. And Chief O'Neill's with us if you would like to ask him additional questions. But for this section in particular, this ordinance, we are just repealing and clarifying that we are not citing someone just for the act of asking for money, panhandling in an aggressive manner. We would do that through other more specific mechanisms through the code and through other statutes.
Okay, because I was under the understanding that because it was considered a highway ramp, that our police officers could not enforce the law there, and it's even posted that you can't be there. And I still see it every single day. So I was just wondering if this would take effect.
So I'll give a brief intro and then I'll turn it to Chief O'Neill. But where it is WashDOT property or where it is state highway, that's not for our Auburn police officers. Generally, we're looking at the state patrol in those areas. And I believe where you're referencing at that intersection and beyond is where our officers are looking at enforcing. But Chief O'Neill, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, so when you're out there at Highway 18 near Auburn Way, one of the challenges is that this is a city ordinance and we don't have the ability to enforce that city ordinance on an off-ramp because it's part of the freeway. But in that situation, what we do is that's where we enforce the state law of disorderly conduct if they come out and interfere with the flow of vehicle traffic. But ultimately, we use the law and these ordinances as a last alternative. A lot of times when we're dealing with folks out there that are on the side of the freeway panhandling or engaging in what could be termed aggressive begging, we're trying to get them to resources or get them to facilities where they could get help and get what they need instead of creating more of a burden by either arresting them or giving them a fine. So at the end of the day, we use enforcement action as a last resort. We're more or less out there trying to solve a problem and keep them and our motoring citizens safe.
Councilmember Trump, I know you're muted. Okay, other council questions? Councilmember Stearns?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Kendra and everyone else for bringing this. It's really, I spent some time working on aggressive panhandling ordinances prior in my career. So I really appreciate this. And yeah, I think the Willis case specifically dealt with panhandling at an off-ramp, like Council Member Trout Manuel was mentioning. So, constitutional rights are important. I really believe in them. So I really appreciate what you're doing for the city. So thank you.
Okay. Other questions, Council? Okay. Director Como and Chief O'Neill, thank you very much. Appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you.
Okay, next we will move into our Public Works and Community Development discussion items. And for that portion of the meeting, we'll turn this meeting over to Councilmember Brown. Yes.
Councilmember J. Raj had a question too.
I'm sorry, Councilmember J. Raj.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I want to thank Kendra Como for putting this together. I just need some clarification. By the way, Kendra, welcome back.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
My question is the city code text being repealed? Which part of this is being repealed? I'm just kind of like, are we repealing the whole thing, or Why, and how are we going to enforce the law?
Certainly. So we are repealing all of chapter 9.08. So when you look at your draft ordinance, on page 3 is the city code text being repealed, and it pulls out 9.08.010.
You're right.
And so all of that will be removed from our city code if the ordinance is passed by council. And then the actual conduct that we are looking at for enforcement is, again, the conduct that endangers safety and not the vulnerable conduct where someone is panhandling and asking for money. So for example, there's already disorderly conduct avenues for us. So if someone, walks into traffic, I'm using the situation in Willis, which arose out of the city of Lakewood. So if an individual walks into traffic, blocks traffic, disrupts pedestrians or vehicle progress, that can be handled in different ways that we already have available aside from aggressive begging. In addition, one part of aggressive begging that had been used previously can be dealt with through fraud. So that's if someone is misleading in what they're doing. So we have all of these mechanisms already available, and we just want to make sure it's clear that we are not citing or enforcing something where a vulnerable individual is just really asking for money. That's the piece that aggressive begging has been used for pre-2016, but not since.
Okay, so my question then becomes is, we're not going to take them to jail because they're panhandling. That's plain and simple.
If you're
we're not going to penalize them for panhandling.
Right, and just using the definition of panhandling as someone that is standing on the side of a road, perhaps in a public right of way, asking for money. That conduct alone, you are correct. The answer would be no. We might engage in conversations informally and ask that person, how we can engage in services. We have a variety of people, if in the city that have been working on that outreach, our officers are included in that effort, but that is not criminal conduct. The criminal conduct is where they're really endangering the life or safety of an individual.
Okay, so parking themselves in a side corner, panhandling, technically is using public property, isn't it?
I guess it would depend. I don't mean to be picking on the use of words, but what do you mean by using public property?
When they're standing in the corner of a street on the pedestrian walkway, say for instance, and panhandling. So they are standing on public property, right?
Yes, in your scenario, it sounds like they would be standing on public property.
Okay, so how would that affect? Now I'm putting something else together, working with the parks stuff as well.
Right.
So I was reading that where people putting up a tent and parking themselves in the side street, like it's public property. So that would be illegal to do that. So how would that be different from this and that?
So if your presence on the property raises other types of issues, that would be dealt with differently. Aggressive begging is really just about the speech, if you will, of asking someone else for money. So that is what aggressive begging under chapter 9.08 is dealing with. The other piece about whether or not you can be present on public property for how long and in what form is dealt with in other chapters of our code and would not be affected by this repeal.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Kendra. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Okay, Council, then just make sure any other questions before we move on? Okay. You okay, Councilmember Stearns?
Question?
Okay, we're good. I'm sorry, go ahead, Teresa.
Councilmember Stearns had a question?
Councilmember Stearns.
I'm okay. I don't need to ask it.
Okay.
I'm gonna lower my hand. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Sorry for the confusion, everybody. When we're on the virtual, sometimes it's a little difficult when we try and coordinate, even though we can see each other. But once again, Director Como and Chief O'Neill, thank you very much. Appreciate it. And now we will move on to our next agenda item, Public Works and Community Development discussion items. And that will be Councilmember Brown.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. And hello, council members. Tonight we have a capital project status report and feature project with Director Galb.
So Ryan Vondrake and Scott Nutter are actually going to do the presentation for you tonight and hopefully answer your question.
Thank you.
Good evening, Council. For the record, I am Ryan Vondrake, Capital and Construction Engineering Manager, and we also have Scott Nutter, Traffic Operations Engineer. The presentation is being uploaded right now. So we're here to report on the status of the capital projects, as well as present the feature project for the summer quarter. Next slide. So let's get started. So at the time I submitted this presentation to the agenda packets, we had 39 active capital projects, but we just started scoping a small project for the water utility for a work at a pump station. That project will be in the next capital project status report for the month of August. So we now have 40 active capital projects. The total project value of those 40 projects is approximately 69 million. That makes 23 projects that are in design and 17 that are currently in construction. Next slide. So this graphic is an illustration that shows the total number of projects formally bid the last 4 years against the total construction costs for those projects. So if we look at the year 2017, which is the first bar on your left, we formally bid 17 projects that year, where the total construction costs were just over 26 million. If you fast forward to 2020, the last bar on your right, we have formally bid 14 projects to date at a value of 26.5 million. So we're right in line with the previous 4 years, and excited about what we've been able to accomplish this particular year. Next slide. In addition to the 14 projects we formally bid, what else are we expecting to advertise this construction season? Well, in September, we have the 2020 crack seal project. This project will seal asphalt pavement cracking along various streets throughout the city. We have a couple pictures of what crack sealing asphalt pavement looks like. On the left, you see the material being applied to the pavement, and then on the right, that's the finished product. Though it may not look pretty, this process or technique actually adds service life to our roadways. Next slide. So a question was asked of how do we decide which projects we move forward with each year? Well, first, you have the comprehensive plan, which reviews existing infrastructure for each of the 3 utilities: water, sanitary sewer, and storm drainage, and the transportation program, and then identifies systematic programmatic needs for each of those, whether it be preservation, general maintenance, replacement, expansion, or improvement. This plan identifies those high-level needs. That initial need identified in the comprehensive plan is then funneled into the capital facilities plan, which is a 6-year plan that is reviewed and updated annually and then ultimately approved by City Council. This plan prioritizes projects based on the available funding and need. After the capital facilities plan comes the development of the tier budget, which includes projects as well as programs that are actually funded. So you have specific projects that have funding allocated to them, and then funded programs such as the repair and replacement programs, where a project or projects are then created out of that specific program. An example of a program project would be the 2021 sewer repair and replacement project, the CP 2010, that you can find on page 11 of 14 of the capital project status report. As much as I'd love to say that everything turns out perfect, things happen, which changes how projects are prioritized, which is where budget amendments and in-fund transfers come into play. You have changing circumstances or needs that happen on projects that are in design or in construction, where additional funding is necessary to address that need. A phrase we all don't like to hear in construction is unexpected site conditions. That ends up creating some issues for us at times, creating the need for additional funds for projects. Construction bids sometimes come in high, potentially creating a situation where priorities need to be re-examined in order to continue funding that particular project. You also have emergencies or emergent need type projects that come up. The small water project I spoke about earlier is an example of that, where a specific piece of equipment is failing and needs to be replaced. And then you also have unexpected available grant funding, which may require changing priorities. This happens from time to time, where you need to change how we're prioritizing projects because you don't want to pass up an opportunity where grant funding becomes available. So that's pretty much how we decide which projects we move forward with given each year. Now we're going to move on to the feature project, and I'll have Scott take over from here.
Good evening. I'm Scott Nutter. Can everyone hear me? Okay. So I'm the project manager for the citywide streetlight LED conversion project. This project was recently featured in the Auburn magazine, in case you've already seen it. I'm trying to get my screen situated here. 1 second. So this project scope is to convert city-owned Cobra Head streetlights to LED, to add smart lighting controls. And currently the city has 2,849 Cobra Head style lights in this project. The Cobra Heads are the straight pole with the curved arm, the aluminum lights that you see around town. Lighting controls are remote monitoring and control that we can talk about a little bit later. Not included in the project is the downtown decorative lights, the residential decorative lights, or the non-city owned lights, such as the ones attached to PSC utility poles. Conversion of the remaining city lights will be considered as potential future phases of the project as funding is available. Conversion of the non-city lights like PSC is done by a case-by-case basis or as requested. And it should be noted that if we convert PSC owned lights, it affects the monthly bill that we pay PSC for those lights. So this project helps the environment. This project will reduce annual power consumption by more than 2 million kilowatt hours. This equates to nearly 1.1 million pounds of carbon dioxide. This provides like the same amount of CO2 reduction as planting 457 acres of trees. The LED light fixtures don't use mercury or other toxic substances and are often 100% recyclable. And the longer lifetimes of the fixtures also means fewer end up in the trash. The LED street lights use 50 to 60% less energy than the standard high pressure sodium lights. They use fewer watts to produce the same amount of light, saving money to power each street light. The conversion of the city's streetlights to LEDs is anticipated to reduce the city's streetlight bill by upwards of $150,000 a year. Additionally, standard streetlight fixtures require replacement every 2 to 5 years, compared to LED fixtures that can last up to 20 years. Improves lighting and service. LED lights produce better color rendering and uniform illumination patterns. The white light emitted by LEDs shows colors as they really are and provides better visibility for drivers and pedestrians. LED lights use lenses rather than reflectors to direct the light and reduces light pollution and improves the efficiency of the fixture. The new lighting control, now I did it. The new lighting control technology is going to use the city's existing Census wireless system, the meter reading system that was built by the water utility. The automated control system will allow us to see real-time monitoring of power consumption, automated alerts and notices. We know when power goes out or when a light goes out. The total project cost is about 2.7 million. We have 500,000 from the Department of Commerce, Energy Efficiency and Solar Grant Program. We will be getting close to $350,000 back from PSC power rebates. And we are using 1.85 million from the City of Auburn using real estate excise tax revenues. And that is our project. Does anyone have any questions?
Anyone have questions? I guess not. Director Gaub, is there any more to present on this agenda item?
Larry.
Oh, I'm sorry, Chris. Yeah, Chris.
I'm sorry. I'm in full screen and I can't get out of it. I'm very technologically challenged tonight, so I didn't know how to raise my hand. But yeah, the question I had was how much money are we going to save in terms of energy and maintenance costs?
We are showing $150,000 a year in power savings on our power bill, and potentially up to $40,000 in maintenance costs with having to go out and change bulbs and change fixtures as they fail.
Okay, great. And then are we planning to redirect the savings, or what's going to happen there?
It's direct fund money. It's general fund money.
Okay, so it'll just go wherever we want it to go then.
It's savings.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor DeCoursey and Councilmember Girard have questions?
Hi, I didn't get your name. What was your name again?
Scott Nutter.
Hi, Scott. Thank you for your presentation. This might sound like a dumb question, but are we using solar at all for these lightings?
No, the technology for solar to do street lighting isn't really there yet.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes.
Council or Deputy Mayor DeCoursey.
Thank you, Councilmember Brown. I don't have a question on the project, but I do have a question on the capital project status report. If Ryan is still on.
I am still on. I don't know why,
Great.
but I'm having a little bit of connection issues.
Oh, that's okay. No problem. Ryan, two things. One is, firstly, I noticed that on our report, the columns we had previously for the engineer of record and the contractor are no longer there. I do see that under the recent progress, you've identified who the contractor was and the contractor award. But once the subsequent reports come out, I'm not going to remember that it was Northwest Cascade or whoever. Just questioning why we would have removed those two columns. I think Ryan has connectivity issues again.
I think Ryan has some connectivity issues right now. So this came out of when we changed to the interactive mapping that we do for the capital projects and trying to simplify how that reporting was done and the information that was there, and also simplify that spreadsheet for the council packet. So we could certainly add more information in there. The question is the specifics of what's necessary, because when you're looking out there at construction, our capital projects, we have 17 of them out there right now. And we probably have 30 to 50 construction contracts out there for private development and utility contractors. So I don't know how much that will help you narrow down exactly what your question might be on if you see a contractor.
Well, in previous times when we did have the two columns, we identified who the general contractor was. I'm not interested in subcontractors, just the prime, and then also who the engineer of record was. So if it's not a column, perhaps in each report, we can have a little footnote at the bottom of the recent progress, just giving us who the GC is and who the engineer is, just as a point of reference. So we know who that is.
Yeah, and I think Jacob jumped on. Do you want to say something?
Yeah, hi, Jacob Sweeting, city engineer. So I just wanted to add a little bit to what Ingrid had said, and that is that the information definitely is still available through that interactive map. So when you go online to the GIS and you're looking at the map and you click on that project, it will still have the information that was there before. Like Ingrid said, we had tried to get that table a little easier to read with all the projects and all the information that was on there to get it down to that 8.5 by 11 printout. So that's why we ended up reducing that. But the information certainly is still there if you want to try to find it online. But
I appreciate that, Jacob. But I don't think myself, and I'm not speaking for the other council members, but I don't go online regularly to look at our projects, and I mean I do on occasion. But the capital project status report is kind of our frame of reference, and I appreciate we've gone back to the monthly reports, and it gives me that information. And I think, again, all I'm asking for is just somewhere in that recent progress report, all we do is just add very simply who the general contractor is and who the engineer is. And that's just for us, just to have that reference of knowing who's doing the projects at a glance, instead of going online looking all the time. I personally rely upon the capital project status report for pretty much everything I look at as a council member.
Sure. Well, we can certainly add it back in then. No problem.
Yeah, and that, again, don't go back at it in the other two columns. Let's keep it 8.5 by 11. But the simplest way possible to put that on there it would be appreciated. I appreciate that. The other question I have is on this is on page 24 of 126, or page 5 of 14 of the capital project status report under CP 1929. So we have the project description there, and in the context of the project description, it points out the replacement of various items in the project, and it states water meters. Were the water meters in this particular project not replaced under the water meter project, or are the water meters not actually being replaced as part of the project?
And I'm wondering if Ryan is still on.
Yeah, he kind of lost connectivity there for a while.
Okay, so your question was on CP 1929, correct?
1929, yeah. And it's related to the water meter. So it shows here, if I'm reading it properly, that the water meters are being replaced under this project. And if in fact they are, they were not replaced during the water meter project, or if they were, we probably shouldn't show that they're being replaced under this project. So
correct. And it's
just
meter,
a clarification.
Yeah, it's probably the water meter boxes themselves that are actually being replaced, as well as all up to the water meter.
Okay.
The meters themselves, you're correct. They're not being replaced because they were just replaced during the AMI installation. It's basically reusing those unless we need to replace them for some reason.
Okay, and I see Lisa's out, so maybe Lisa can also corroborate that.
That is all correct.
Okay,
Lisa,
great.
Utilities Engineering Manager, that is all correct. That the meters will simply be moved into the new boxes that are being placed associated with the water main replacement.
Very good. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Ingrid. And thank you to Ryan, and thank you to Scott.
Do we have any other questions? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is a discussion of the Hudson Payback Agreements, Ordinance 6770, 6771, and 6772.
Member Brown? Councilmember Troutman-Well had a question.
I'm sorry. Claude asked the question that I wanted to ask, and because I remembered that we had already done that project. So thank you, Claude, for asking that question. And thank you for answering it.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none at this point, we will go to the next agenda item. Director Gaub, please.
Yes, so tonight we have a presentation on the Hudson Payback Agreements, of which there are 3 that will be going through the process on in the next few weeks. And we have Cecile Malik and Bob Elwell, as well as a few other staff on the line for any questions afterwards.
Okay, good evening, Mayor or Deputy Mayor, council members. I'm Bob Elwell, the sewer utility engineer. And tonight, Susan Fenhouse, the water utility engineer, Cecile Malik, the senior transportation planner, and I are going to give you a brief overview of payback agreements and discuss the 3 payback agreements for the Hudson Distribution Center development associated with ordinances 6770, 6771, and 6772. So next slide, please. Okay, so sometimes when a development occurs in the city, the developer often has to construct public facilities such as streets, traffic signals, water and sewer lines, or pump stations, et cetera, in order to enable that development to function. And oftentimes those facilities don't just benefit that development, but also can be a benefit to a number of the neighboring properties. So what a payback agreement does is it allows the initial developer to recoup some of their upfront expenses when those other properties develop and connect to those improvements. So sometimes it's referred to as a latecomers agreement, and it's an agreement between the city and the developer. And based on that agreement, the city will collect a proportionate share of the cost of those improvements of those facilities from the future developers when and if they connect. And then they will go ahead and reimburse the developer who funded the initial design and construction of the facilities. So as we show on the slide, the agreements related to streets are valid for 15 years, and the agreements related to utilities are valid for 20 years. And there are some more details we've included in your packet on pages 42 and 43, some frequently asked questions about payback agreements that, if you would like to look in a little bit more detail on those. So in the case specifically of the Hudson development, it's a large warehouse distribution center in the northwest corner of the city, The developer had to construct a water main extension, a sewer pump station and sewer mains, and a traffic signal at the corner of 287th Street and West Valley Highway. So in addition to allowing the Hudson Distribution Center to open and function, those improvements also kind of set the table for a lot of the other properties in the area to go ahead and develop. And we've actually already seen some progress made on applications for those properties as well. So tonight we'll be considering 3 separate payback agreements for the construction of, first of all, for the construction of the water main, then the sewer pump station and sewer mains, and then finally the traffic signal, so that when future development occurs, the developer can recoup a portion of the cost for constructing those. So now Susan Fenhouse is going to discuss the specifics of the water agreement.
Thank you, Bob. The water payback is actually the simplest of the 3 that you're going to hear about tonight. There was an existing water main on South 287th that the Hudson development connected to and extended to the west edge of its property. And so all the costs of this new 12-inch water main and the valves and the hydrants are included and eligible for the payback agreement. In figuring the reimbursement fees or to the benefited properties, we use the front footage method. And this is taking the frontage length of each property that is benefited or fronting the improvements and adding all of those total lengths up. And then for this particular one, it was 808 lineal feet. And then each parcel would owe a proportionate share of that. Again, this one is very simple simply because there's only 2 parcels affected. The Hudson development parcel, and then to the south of that, another one. So this payback would take the costs associated with that new main and simply divide them by 2. And like, as Bob had mentioned, it's only when that other parcel to the south would connect and start receiving water, or actually during the application process, that this payback fee would be owed. And now I believe Bob will present the sewer.
Okay, so for this development, the applicant was required to construct a sewer pump station. The other sewers in the area were just not low enough to allow gravity from this whole area to flow to it. So we needed a pump station for the area. And it was designed to collect sewage flows from all the properties that are in the basin. That's the highlighted area that you see on the map. And let's see. And then from there, it will pumps it to an existing manhole that's near the southwest corner of the basin. So during the design process for the station, we worked with the developer to identify the expected amounts of sewage flow from each of the parcels based upon their zoning and also their potential developable area, which is essentially the area of their parcel, subtracting out critical areas such as steep slopes and wetlands and other areas that weren't likely to be developed, and came up with an amount that they had to design, amount of sewage they had to design the station for. So we use that same process in reverse to allocate the costs of the pump station to the various parcels. Basically, a parcel that was going to need to use more of the sewage capacity would end up being assigned more value as far as the payback agreement goes. So that's how the pump station charges were allocated. That's sometimes called an area charge for payback agreements, in that it's based on the size of the lot, essentially, with a few other factors involved. The total cost for the pump station was 1.75 million approximately. And so the reimbursement amounts for these parcels, they range anywhere from about 6,000 for one of the smaller residential areas that don't have a lot of developable areas, all the way up to 200 or 300,000 for some of the large manufacturing lots that exist now. So, and those are listed in one of the appendices of the payback agreement. So, additionally, the developer constructed 900 feet of gravity sewer along their frontage. And this is similar to the water payback with other properties that are along the frontage also owing for approximately half of that, the cost of installing those gravity lines. So, and that's all I have for the sewer. Cecile will now talk about the traffic.
I apologize, it wouldn't let me unmute as I was sharing my screen. Will be share, oops.
Cecile, maybe try unsharing and resharing your screen again.
Thanks. Something went very wrong. PowerPoint. This is not working. All right. Here we are. Sorry about that. So for part of the development, Hudson was required to build a traffic signal at the intersection of South 287th Street and West Valley Highway, Northwest. And all the properties within that area that's highlighted here on your screen will benefit from this traffic signal because they use this intersection to access the property. So once these properties redevelop, they will be charged their fair share of the cost of the signal based on the transportation impact of their development. And in your packet, in the frequently asked questions, I went over how that's calculated, how that was decided. But in a nutshell, we took the cost of the traffic signal, we looked at all the properties, and we evaluated the maximum transportation impact from a possible redevelopment based on the zone. And we divided the cost of the signal by this, by a number of trip generation. And we gave a price for each trip generated. So when a property redevelop, for each additional trip that they generate, on average, it's an average daily trip generated, they will be charged that portion of the fee. And so for the next 15 years, as properties redevelop around Hudson, we will evaluate how many more trips are generated on average for this development. And when they apply for the building permit, we will collect that amount and send it back to Hudson to reimburse their a portion of the cost. So Bob will talk about the next step in the process and where we are.
Okay, so the general formal steps for establishing a payback agreement are shown up here on the slide. The process really starts informally when, during the pre-application phase, when a developer comes in and wants to develop a property, we'll start talking about what the possibilities are then. But it really starts formally when they submit the payback application. And so the city then goes through, the city staff goes through a number of processes as far as discussing the methodology, and then the whole plan approval and construction process, reviewing the costs. And just recently, we've completed the agreements and the public notice documents. We sent out notice to the benefited property owners last week, notifying them of the upcoming public hearing. So the next step after this briefing is on September 8th, we have scheduled to hold the public hearing. And depending upon whether there are a lot of comments or questions or anything like that, we also on that day have set up to approve the ordinances that will allow the agreements to go forward. So September 8th is kind of the next day. During this period, we'll be receiving we may be receiving comments on them if any of the property owners have any questions or comments. So following the approval of the ordinances, from then on it's an administrative process. We have to get the agreement recorded, so it goes up to the county and attached to the parcels. And then also we put it in our permitting software and our system, so that as properties come in to develop, we identify, you owe a certain amount for these payback agreements based on this. And then as we receive the payments, we forward them to the developers. So that's all I have on the formal presentation. Now we're all available for any questions you may. I know we blitzed through that fairly quickly, but if you have any questions on that, we'll be happy to answer them.
Councilmember Trotman-Wall has a question.
Hi, thank you everybody for a great presentation. My question is to Bob. Where and how are you going to do the public hearing at? Is it going to be virtual, or where is that going to be done and how?
It's part of the city council meeting scheduled for September 8th. And so that would be it'll either be virtual. I assume it will be virtual, but unless something changes. But it could also be in person. But yeah, and there's information on the notices of where to go to find out the information for the meeting.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councilmember Stearns has a question.
Hi, thanks for the good presentation. So what was there before the development?
That it was just undeveloped. It was essentially farmland. I don't know if it was being actively farmed, but essentially open area.
And then so it's not too far from Mill Creek wetlands area. I mean, so what kind of environmental review was done? Or I mean, how does our city do any oversight of that, or is that King County, or how does that work?
No, it went through our normal development process. So the planning department had a pretty significant, role in processing that. I can't speak too much to the specifics of the wetland area in Mill Creek. Someone else may be able to address that, but I know that all of our staff that needed to look at it, it was routed through them appropriately.
Okay, thanks.
So just to add on to what Bob said, so it went through a SEPA process with the city of Auburn. Can everybody hear me? Okay, can everybody hear me yet? No?
Ingrid, do you want to try closing and opening back up? Oh, scoot closer to the mic.
Can you hear me now? Still not.
A little bit.
A little bit. Okay, so how about now? Okay, so It went through our normal development process through planning and went through the SEPA process for the environmental assessment and evaluation. And they would have looked at any of the critical areas ordinance requirements, which would include your wetlands and streams and all of those impacts. And that would have been addressed during that whole development process. We're at the tail end of the project where we're actually finishing up the construction and closing out what they've already built. So all of that probably happened 2 to 4 years ago in the process that they went through.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any more questions? Seeing none, I will turn the gavel back over to the deputy mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Brown. And thank you everyone for your presentations. Do we have any other discussion items tonight? Okay, I don't see any hands raised. Any new business that we need to cover? Okay, I don't see any hands raised for new business. So one last time, anything else to go to the order? Councilmember Troutman.
I just have an apology. I didn't call you deputy mayor when I asked my question. So I apologize for calling you Claude, deputy mayor.
That is not a problem. We have titles and they quite honestly, that's what they are. They're titles, so no problem at all. Okay, everyone, we did have a couple little technology glitches tonight, but nothing serious. So thank you everybody for your presentation. And with that, we are adjourned. Everybody have a good evening and wear your mask.
Good night.